The Hard Truth, Season 10, with Akosia Konedu, only on Viasat 1.
Brought to you by EcoBank.
With just a few months remaining till the November 7th general elections, a lot of focus will be on the key issues such as the performance of the economy, unemployment, and the general business environment. The government continues to praise its handling of these critical areas, while opposition political parties continue to paint a different picture. In the end, whose side of the story is a Ghanaian voter supposed to listen to in making their choice? Tonight, on The Hard Truth, we take a critical look at the performance of the Ghanaian economy and its effect on employment and the general business environment. We have Mr. Lesley Dwight Mensah, resident economist at the Institute of Physical Studies, Ghana. And to discuss these issues, my name is Nana Akosia Konedu, and this is The Hard Truth. We are proudly brought to you by EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Tonight, we're talking economics. Performance of the economy. Are we doing well? What of the roadshow that the Minister of Finance and its colleagues are embarking on? And what would you also say about Bawumia's 10 points of unemployment? To help us talk about these issues, I have in studio Lesley Dwight Mensah. He is the resident economist of the Institute for Physical Studies, Ghana. Welcome to The Hard Truth, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Right. Now, let's look at what Dr. Bawumia, said. He makes a critical point on the need for a national identification system, something which has been in the works for a while. Now, with numerous challenges, are we as a nation, in your opinion, ignoring the benefits of a properly done national database and its benefits to the economy and specifically in job creation? What would you say?
Well, it seems to be the case, and Dr. Bawumia raised the issue of a national ID within the context of his point about revolutionizing.
Before you go on, let me just let viewers know what he said. The 10 points which Dr. Bawumia made. He said formalizing the economy. It's one, financial inclusion. That's banking the unbanked. The third one is diversifying export base, develop property market, favorable policy framework, increase infrastructure investment, address corruption, prioritize agriculture, value added to raw materials, and the last one, invest in skill training research.
Yes, so he raised the subject within the broader issue of formalization of the economy and engineering a data revolution. Now, knowing your people, who they are, where they live, what they do, and in reference to unemployment, whether they are working or not, is critical. And particularly to deal with unemployment, what we have failed to do in this country is to find out who are the unemployed among us. What do they do? Where do they live? What skills do they have? What schools did they attend? And that would give a sense about why possibly they are unemployed. Another instance where having a national ID and knowing where people live and others is important is when people go to a bank to ask for a loan. So these are the situations in which the lack of a formal ID system.
But Les, looking at these 10 points, listed, do you think they are vague? Because the Deputy Communications Minister said they are speculative, they are vague, and redundant. And Clement Apak also described the plan as a joke. What would you say to that?
Bawumia put forward broad ideas. There were no details, but they are broad ideas which I believe cover the universe of solutions that many an economist would prescribe for dealing with unemployment. As for people saying it's a joke, often those opinions are politicized. But otherwise, They were broad ideas which I agree with, and I believe most economists would agree with as the right steps to take.
Why is that? Why would you argue with that?
Because it talks, for instance, about macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability as a prerequisite for a prosperous business environment and significant job creation. Now, in our history as a country, we have found out that any time the macroeconomy has experienced substantial instability, the overall economic performance and the prosperity of businesses, the welfare of individuals have deteriorated. And that's the situation we have been in since 2013. And by macroeconomic stability, we mean the variables that affect or matter to our everyday economic lives should be stable and moving in the right direction. So you can take inflation, which is the rate at which the prices of the goods and services we buy is rising. Now you need that to be low and stable, okay, so that people's incomes can be preserved.
Now, let's look at this. But we also talked about value added to raw materials. I want to ask you, Ghana continues to remain a major export of raw materials with, the expected industrialization of the economy taking a slow pace. Now, Dr. Baumi also makes a point about diversifying exports. Is the government doing enough in creating a conducive environment for the manufacturing sector to grow as much as possible?
Absolutely not. It's never been a major agenda executed in this country to well, of course, I have to make an exception for the Nkrumah years. We haven't decided in a determined manner with proper strategies and a long-term laid out plan to industrialize Ghana and to grow the manufacturing sector. Meanwhile, we have learned from the history of the economic development of countries that those that have prospered are those that have gone through a phase in which the manufacturing sector has driven the economy. And so typically for countries that avoid that phase, as we have done, moved from primitive agriculture to a services-dominated economy, typically for countries that leapfrog, the manufacturing phase, they don't do as well as the wealthy nations of today. So it's a received wisdom about how countries develop, that you have to pass through the manufacturing phase. Unfortunately, we have not. And in the last 3 years, the manufacturing sector has contracted. Meanwhile, it is the same sector that holds the greatest promise for job creation, because the opportunities there for raising productivity levels.
Why is that? Don't we have the skills for that? I'm thinking, why do we have to contract people? Don't we have the right skills to do it ourselves here?
I said the manufacturing sector has contracted.
Okay.
The output there has declined,
Okay.
But as I said, it's never been on our agenda. It's never been on our agenda. That's why we haven't been able to do it, So I can't talk about a plan that has been executed and not been well done, because it's never been on our agenda anyway.
So how can we have that on our agenda?
We need a plan. And I agree with the ongoing process.
Lesley, do we do all talk and no action? Do you think that we sit here and then we talk about plans, but do you think Ghana is all talk, no action? So these are perfect plans, about me, say, but do you think they can be implemented, when it comes to implementation? Can they be fronted?
Well, we do all talk and little action.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. In 2011, an industrial strategy was launched in this country, and it had attached to it a plan to implement the strategy. Now, in that strategy, the government committed to run low budget deficits, to borrow less and less from the domestic economy so that the private sector can get more to borrow and borrow those funds cheaply.
Right.
But that same government has been running very large deficits and borrowing so much in the domestic economy, contributing to high interest rates, and as we say in economics, crowding out the rest of the economy. So that's saying one thing in that plan, which hasn't been implemented anyway, and then doing the very opposite. That's a classic example. You want low interest rates so that your manufacturers can borrow cheaply, but the government is doing the very things that will contribute to high interest rates.
So it's like we should take the decision to do it.
Absolutely.
Now, some personalities are, expressing their doubts as to how some of these points, will contribute to unemployment. Do you see a direct correlation between the Baume's plan and the reduction of unemployment? What do you say? Is there a direct correlation between its points and unemployment?
Well, if the plans are implemented, well, of course, we should see some benefits, because we have learned again from the history of how countries have developed that when these things have been in place, those societies have thrived. But it was a lecture that he gave, and you don't solve problems by writing essays. You actually have to execute.
So it boils down to implementation.
That's right.
We'll be right back.
The Hard Truth, Season 10, with Akosia Konedu, only on Vice at 1.
Brought to you by EcoBank. At EcoBank, we see a great future. One that's full of opportunity for those who want to be the best. With over 1,000 branches of a single bank across 33 African countries. It's a future where trade can flourish without boundaries. The future is breathtaking, with enormous cross-border investments helping business and government build new infrastructure, while individuals achieve their ambitions right across Africa. The future is Pan-African, and EcoBank is the Pan-African bank.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Hard Truth, and we are proudly brought to you by EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Lesley, Dwight, Mensah, Senior Economist, Institute for Fiscal Studies, Ghana, is my guest. Lesley, what do you make again of Baume's suggestion on instituting a tax credit incentive for businesses that employ fresh graduates in order to encourage hiring of more youth and discouraging of the tendency of, business experiences and all that? What would you say?
It's a good proposal to use tax incentives. So essentially you are incentivizing companies by telling them if you employ fresh graduates, or for every additional graduates that you employ, you get a tax rebate. It's something that has to be considered and maybe shaped properly as a policy. And I think it's been tried before. I don't know the success of that. But
you realize again that one of the main causes of macro instability we experienced for the past several years is because of the 24 budget overrun. Now, the government, that time had set about 6.7% budget deficit target. Now, it ended up, overshooting the target by almost 100%, resulting in a fiscal deficit. I want to ask you, presently, the fiscal deficit is estimated at about 7.2% and of GDP. The government has also indicated on numerous occasions that it will control its expenditure for 2016 and targeting a fiscal deficit equivalent to about 5.3% of GDP. Fitch, ratings agency, believes that the government will spend more than it has indicated, and we've been forecast a fiscal deficit of about 6.3%. What do you make of Fitch's, position?
I think Fitch is probably close to the truth. And I think their forecast is based on what they have seen about our history. We have shown a tendency to exceed our budgetary targets in election years. So one would not be wrong to forecast that a similar thing will happen this year. I share that thinking, actually. I think
6.3?
Not the exact forecast. I think they'll probably exceed the deficit, but not by a wide deviation as happened in 2012, because that would be catastrophic.
So what will contribute to that percentage?
The current target of the government is to hit a deficit of 5.3% of GDP, but already there are pressures on that target because it was based on an average oil price of $53 per barrel. Meanwhile, the oil price has averaged less than $35 in the first 3 months. And so we need an oil price of more than $60 for the rest of the year, to be able to meet our revenue targets. And then on the expenditure side, you remember that recently the government climbed down on the utility tariff increases. It reduced the level of the increases, I think, from February or so. Now that implies that there'll be subsidies to fund, because those tariff levels had been announced and gazetted.
Yeah.
So if you ask the utilities to charge less, then you have to pay the difference. Now those subsidies were not considered in the original 2016 budget. So now some accommodation has to be made to finance those subsidies. So that's pressure on the expenditure side. And then there's pressure on the revenue side from the decline in the oil price. And so either they cut some critical spending to accommodate these pressures, or they borrow more and exceed the deficit.
Now let's look at this. Tepe, is expected finance minister in that respect. He's expected to lead a team to London and New York this week on a non-deal Eurobond roadshow. Now, a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, Dr. Ebu Texan, indicated that the high debt level is likely to lead a yield of 11% if the government was to launch a fifth Eurobond. Now, even though the finance minister is stressing that it will go on a non-deal roadshow, would it be economically prudent for the nation to pursue this Eurobond, considering our, high debt levels and economic indicators?
Well, the government is in a fix. It's in a very, very tight corner. When you run a deficit, automatically you borrow to finance a deficit. And you have to decide whether to borrow at home or abroad to finance the deficit. Now, the reason they have shown a penchant for issuing Eurobonds is that domestically, because they have borrowed so much at home, the interest rates have risen to very high levels, and the debt service burden on the budget is substantial. In fact, it's bigger than the expenditure on debt service is more than 50 times bigger than the expenditure on public investment. So, on the other hand, the yields in dollar terms on the Eurobonds are lower. And so I think when they do their calculations, they feel that provided the exchange rate is stable, it's probably cheaper to issue a Eurobond to finance the deficit. They're in a fix, that's why.
But it's like he says, it's one of their routine, visits to see investors. I mean, is it okay? Is it really necessary? What do you think?
They plan to issue a Eurobond.
Yes. But he's saying it's just a routine.
What they're doing now is arranging meetings with investors to test the market's appetite for the bond, to get a sense of what interest rates the market will be asking for before they come back again to issue the bond. So it's non-deal because they are not agreeing anything. They're simply meeting with investors, selling the prospects of the country to them, and then listening to their own views, getting feedback, and they come back and then they prepare for the bond itself. It's normal in the market to do these things. Yeah.
But do you think IMF is okay with that?
Yeah, the IMF is okay, because they have sanctioned the Eurobond because it's part of the financing plan for the 2016 deficit. And as I said, the alternative is to borrow at home. But the interest rates here are quite high. And so they feel that the interest rates are quite high and the tenures, the maturity levels are lower than you would get on the Eurobond market. And so they feel that it's the better alternative. Of course, the risk is that if the exchange rate loses ground, then your cost of servicing that debt in CD terms will escalate. And that has been the problem with the Eurobonds we have issued. But they're in a fix, so it's difficult to say that.
So it's prudent. What the trip or the road thing they are going is it's prudent. It's okay.
Well, it's okay, because sometimes when you're so much in debt, you need to reorganize your liabilities, and that sometimes involves, borrowing more or refinancing some of your debts, So they're borrowing sometimes to manage their liabilities, not be able to invest, They're in a fix. It's a terrible fix.
We'll be right back.
The Hard Truth, Season 10, with Akosia Konedu, only on Vice at 1.
Brought to you by EcoBank. At EcoBank, we see a great future. One that's full of opportunity for those who want to be the best. With over 1,000 branches of a single bank across 33 African countries. It's a future where trade can flourish without boundaries. The future is breathtaking, with enormous cross-border investments helping business and government build new infrastructure, while individuals achieve their ambitions right across Africa. The future is Pan-African, and EcoBank is the Pan-African bank.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Hard Truth, proudly brought to you by EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Lesley, Dwight, Mensah is here. Lesley, in your view, do you think President Mahama, made the right choice in appointing Dr. Nasiru Isahaku as the governor of Ghana, over Dr. Millicent Nah? What would you say?
Well, the same president appointed Dr. Isahaku to the deputy governor's position, and I'm sure he felt at the time that he was competent enough to be a shadow governor. And so if he's competent enough to act in the governor's stead as a deputy, then he probably possesses the requisite skills to take the top job.
And you realize Andrew had a problem with Dr. Wampa because he felt, they felt he was being subservient to the government and wasn't on top of his game. Do you see Dr. Isahaku as someone who is strong and resilient and who can, who not kowtow to government's pressure, especially at this time?
We know what the Bank of Ghana as an institution traditionally does, how it tackles inflation, how it tries to stabilize the exchange rate, how it manages the banking sector. I don't think those institutional aspects of the central bank will change with him as the head, particularly now that we are under an IMF program, and monetary policy is a critical component of that program. And under an IMF program, monetary policy is tailored to achieve the commitments and targets of the program.
What would you say you're expecting, or what should we expect from the new governor?
Well, I expect him to support the government to continue to reduce the deficit, And it's important that the central bank abstains from printing money to finance the government, as was done substantially from 2012 to 2014. It's important because that has contributed to the very high inflation rates and to the exchange rate instability that we have witnessed. Mm-hmm. It's important that the regulatory system is strengthened, to deal particularly with the recent challenges in the banking sector where non-performing loan ratios have started to rise, and the banks are now catching the cold, from the economic difficulties.
7th November is how many months away? 5-6 months away. From where you sit as an economist, what would you expect, or what should the Ghanaian populace expect, from now to 7th of November? What should we expect generally?
Well, we've been through 3 to 4 years of a debilitating, economic crisis. And things have begun to improve, admittedly, especially since we launched the IMF program. The government has begun to reduce.
At a slow pace.
At a slow pace,
Yeah.
Because it's taken 3 years, actually, for us to see small improvements. And it's important that we keep to the track and to the path that we're charting under the fund program to continue to bring down the government's level of borrowing and to avoid repeating past excesses, in election years. As I've said to you, my own forecast is that, based on the pressures to both revenue and expenditure, the deficit will probably be exceeded. But I don't think the deviation will be as wide.
Economists are, I would say, best people to advise the populace. So do we need change? I mean, you've said in some few years we've seen little improvement in the system. Do you think that people are thinking, who do I vote for? From your end, do you think we need change? Do we change President Mahama? Do we maintain him? What would you say?
You mean political change?
Yes, political change. What would you say? Do we need a change to improve things in the economy or to improve things for Ghana? Do we have to change the president? Do we need to change the government is what I'm asking you.
Well, that's a veritably non-economic question, but it would be presumptuous of me to say so, publicly. I leave it to Ghanaians to decide, because it's not for us as economists.
For you as an individual, for you as a citizen of this nation, knowing the challenges we're going through, what would you say? Do you say that we should all rally behind the sitting government, or we should change for someone else? What would you say?
Well, while President Mahama is in charge, we have to support him, and to put pressure on him to do the right things.
So when the right thing is done, we maintain him?
Well, it's not up to me. It's not my decision to make.
What would you say, Lesley, when the right thing is done, improvements are made, and we see that the physical evidence that things are being improved? Do we maintain?
Well, elections are about the history, the current situation, and the future.
Okay.
And so, even though the current situation may be so good, some people may be looking towards the future, and therefore assessing the party's plans for the future. And so it's not unheard of, that well-performing governments have been voted out of office, So I cannot say that if things improve, it should be maintained or removed, People decide, based on
So we should look at present, future, and what?
Assess the history, what they have gone through, the current situation, and what the future holds for them based on the plans put forward by the different political parties.
Lesley, thank you so much for
talking
to the
much.
Hard
It's a
Truth.
pleasure to be
Lesley
here.
Dwight, Mensah, senior researcher, economist.
Resident economist, not
He's
senior.
a resident economist.
I'm not senior.
He's being modest. I want to use senior. So he's my senior resident economist of the Institute for Physical Studies, Ghana. And my name is Nana Akusi. You've been watching The Hard Truth. We've been proudly brought to you by EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Bye.
The Hard Truth, Season 10, with Akosia Konedu, only on Vice at 1.
Brought to you by EcoBank.